Hey folks, welcome back to the Crossbow Magazine Day 2 Hunt Breakdown of the Battle of the Bows. The second day finds me getting to the woods even later than I did the previous day. I spent the morning riding around, checking maps, trying to find properties that were smaller in size but yet still open to the public that may be overlooked by other hunters. So that's where we begin today's episode. Let's get right to it. Well, it's day 2 here in the Battle of the Bows in Wisconsin. It's 12 o'clock and I'm just now headed in, mixing it up a little bit today. Headed into a marsh. I got the hip boots on, trying to shake things up a little because there's a lot of pressure out here. I haven't seen pressure like this in years. This is worse than the first day of rifle season back home. There's at least 3 or 4 vehicles in every parking lot. So I did some road scouting today, looking at onX and looking at maps, and I found this small area. It's 50 acres of public. It doesn't look like much. It's mostly marsh, a few small trees, but I am keying in on 2 pieces of structure I want to check out. There's a finger that runs out into the marsh, and then there's a small pond or wet area, and I want to look at that and see if I can get somewhere where the deer are being funneled and where a mature buck will utilize that to his advantage. Because other than that, I don't see anything that would draw anyone else's attention to this small area. There's just nothing here that stands out that typical bow hunters key in on. So I want to go back into that structure. It's not that far. It's only a couple hundred yards. I'm right along a main highway here. You can probably hear the traffic. But it's noon. I'm headed back in there. I didn't bring a stand with me. I brought a blind. Just going to recon it a little bit, get some intel. I'm still not confident enough to hunt the mornings. I just haven't figured enough out yet. So I'm sticking to the afternoons, doing a little reconnaissance in the morning and then hunting in the evening. So that's where we're at. Day 2, the Battle of the Bows, Public Land Challenge in Wisconsin. If I find something interesting back there and get set up, I will update. Alright, I made it back into the blind. Got everything set up. It looks pretty good back in here as far as structure, but I got back to this water that I saw on the map, and it looks pretty good, but there's human tracks all around it. Now they're a little bit old. Looks like it must have been duck hunters maybe last weekend, because they're just around the pond. And the good news is, when I got here, there was about 30 ducks on the water, so there hasn't been anybody back here today, but there has been human intrusion in here, and that's not a good thing, no matter where you're at. But just no way to get away from the hunting pressure here. I tried deep yesterday and ran into duck hunters, and I'm just a few hundred yards off the road today, and there's more hunters. So the reason I picked this spot, I didn't see a lot of great sign on the way in or anything, but there is some trails. But there's a finger that runs down here about 75 yards in front of me, and I'll turn the camera around here in a little bit and show it to you. And it comes down to a point where this drainage comes out. There's a pond right behind me, about 15 yards behind me, and it runs down, and this point comes down. So there's some good structure there. And if there's a mature buck in here, the way the wind's coming from the west, he should hug this water. That way he's got the security of the water on his downwind side, and he can wind anything he's coming into. So that's the logic for hunting here. It's just tough when you don't have time to get the intel and you don't want to kick all around. This isn't as wet as I thought it was going to be. Not as wet as it looked on the maps. I could have got in here without my hip boots. So it's actually a lot better bedding than I expected, but there just wasn't a tremendous amount of sign as I got back in here. But anything coming down through this structure should be right here in front of me, so that's the hopes anyway. I've got my fingers crossed. Got about 3.5 hours to go before dark, so just going to hang out, let everything calm down, and we'll go from there. It's a lot warmer today. up in the upper 50s, so that's a good thing. Didn't get overheated coming in. I don't believe I kicked out any deer, so thus far everything's good except the human sign back here, and hopefully that's been a week or so ago, and we'll see some action tonight. I'm going to turn the camera around to show you this swale and then the finger out in front of me. There's more trees in here than I expected. On the map I couldn't tell if they were dead trees or live trees, but I could have got the bee stand in here, and if I can make another run at this property, I'll be using the tree stand. I don't know if you can hear the traffic. I'm only a couple hundred yards off the road, but it sets up real well structure wise, so we'll see what happens. I'll turn the camera around. You can see my view from the blind. That finger out in front of you, anything coming down there I should be able to see. And then like I said, typically the mature bucks, they're going to have everything to their advantage, and they should come right down this water's edge, so anything coming is going to be right in my lap. That's the plan. Check back in if something exciting happens or at the end of the hunt. Hope the rest of the crew's having a good day. Well, as I got back in there and set the blind up, there was no sign whatsoever to speak of as far as buck rubs or scrapes or anything like that. There was a couple trails running up through that swale right where I thought they should be. So I was encouraged by that, but I was also discouraged by the man tracks around the pond. But I still wanted to give this property a try. So once I got the blind set up, this is where I made a mistake with the cameras. I had 3 cameras with me. I had a big camcorder with me, which we used on television shows. And then I had the handy cam, and then I had the GoPro. So when I shot the view out the blind for the viewers to see, I used a GoPro. When you use a GoPro, everything looks a lot farther away than it actually is. But when it came time to set the tripod up, I decided to use the camcorder because it was so thick out there that it has a better focusing capability, and I can manually focus the camera, and it has better white balance and more manual options, where my handy cam is just basically all automatic. So I opted for the camcorder on the tripod, and I just set it up and pointed it out into the swale, and that was a mistake I made. I should have just used the handy cam because everything was going to be close anyway. So let's see what happens here. So it's not long into my set actually, and I catch movement down to my right. It's about 70 yards away, and it's coming up towards me. And I pour out my vortex binocular and I glass it, and I can see it's a buck. It's a rack buck, nothing great, maybe 100 inches. And at the same time, I hear something to my left, so I look over, and there's another buck coming the other way, and they're both coming at the same time out of the clear blue. So I knew I wasn't going to shoot either one of them. Neither one of them were shooters. So Instead of just pulling the handy cam out of my bag and filming, for some reason I decided to take the camcorder off of the tripod and then try to get both bucks in the same frame because they were coming right in front of the blind. Well, what happens, the buck on the right gets to me first, and I'm zoomed out as far as I can, and I'm still like right on top of the deer. I know I can see ticks on it. It just looks way too close. The deer's actually 22 yards, 20 to 22 yards, the first deer. When he comes through, and I film him for just a little bit, I get the best footage I can, and I never can get them both in the same frame. They're up in there just kind of messing around a little bit, and I'm trying to keep track of which buck is which. And then the second buck starts coming across. It swings a little wider than the first buck did, because I think the first buck was clearly the dominant buck. The other buck didn't want anything to do with him. So he swings around him, and he comes down almost to the exact same spot the other buck crossed in front of me, and stops, and he catches the sunlight reflecting off the blind. And I still have the camcorder, which is harder to hold. That's why the footage is a little more shaky, and I can't zoom out anymore. I'm just zoomed in too close. Why I didn't leave that camera there and just pull the handy cam out of my bag, I don't know. But that was a mistake on my part, and that was just bad filming, and that's just the way it unfolded, unfortunately for you, the viewer, because I could have had better footage if I could have had more of a panoramic view. So that was that. Got real exciting there for a little bit, and then things settled down, and we'll go back to the hunt. Well, that was interesting. It's 4 o'clock. I had 2 bucks show up at the same time, one coming from the right and one coming from the left. The one from the right appeared to be a little bit bigger. I put the Vortex monocular on him, and I seen I wasn't going to shoot him. I seen him about the same time, so I took the camera off the tripod, and he come through first at 22 yards, and I was trying to get both bucks into the same frame, but the other one swung out wider, and he come back down in about 22 yards. They both crossed at the same point right in front of the blind. I could have shot both of them. Now the second one, he kind of hesitated because the sun's shining down and must have got some reflection off of the blind, but he didn't spook. And I can't show you on camera, but he's bedded about 50 yards to my right. I can just see the top of his back up against the log. But he laid down, and the other buck kept going, so I don't know, both young bucks. I wasn't interested in shooting either one of them, but that's pretty good. It's 4 o'clock. We still got a couple hours to go. Maybe the big boys will start moving later in the day. It's tough to film when they're that close and you're on the ground. I couldn't zoom out anymore, so that's the best I could do. All right, keep my eyes open. Check back in a little bit. Okay, so what some of you may not realize, when you're filming your own hunts, you basically lose about the last 10 minutes of prime time. Probably the most important part when you're a hunter is that last 10 minutes, but when you're filming, you just don't have the light capability to get good footage, and everything is grainy, so you have to quit just when this early season things start to really get good, because the last 5 minutes, as you know, anything can step out. But when you're filming, the footage has to come first, so it just is what it is. So what happens is I've got about 10 minutes of daylight left, and I can tell through the viewfinder that everything is getting grainy and it isn't going to look too good. So without really checking around the blind. Why, I don't know. Another rookie mistake, but this self-filming kind of gets you off your game a little bit. Instead of looking around before I start tearing down, I reach over to the camcorder and I take it off of the tripod. Well, as soon as I do that, I hear something, so I pop my head out, and there's a doe 10 feet from the blind, and she's got me. She's got me pegged. She saw me move, taking that camera out of the window. So now I have two options. She's so close, I know I can't get her in the camcorder. It's just too much camera. So I just slowly set it down, and I pick my GoPro up, and I turn my GoPro on, and I turn it to face her, and then the rest of the hunt footage is filmed just with my GoPro. Even though the doe looks like she's out there 20 or so yards, she's actually like 10 feet from the blind. She is right on top of me. She did get curious enough to get in front of it, but so those were the mistakes I made with the camera. I had the wrong camera in the wrong place in almost every situation on this hunt. Even though I had deer activity and bucks in front of me, I just had too many cameras, and that was a complete mistake on my part, and that's why the footage looks different at different times and is shaky sometimes and sometimes it's not. It's because it's filmed with two different cameras. So let's wrap this hunt up and see how it turns out. Well, that's going to be a wrap for day 2 of the Battle of the Bows. That last doe got in on me. She was about 10 feet from the blind, and she actually caught me moving. I was starting to pack up. But she got curious enough to get in front of the window where I could have killed her, but I got to do better. That's 6 deer in 2 days, 2 bucks today, but nothing I was interested in shooting, and 3 doe yesterday and this doe today, so I got to do better. I don't know. Tomorrow's going to be the same plan. I'm going to get up in the morning and just kind of look at all the maps and take some rides and see what I got to do to get on something worth shooting here. But I can't complain. God blessed me with another beautiful hunt. Got to see some great creatures. I had a squirrel come up, try to get in the blind, but I couldn't get the camera on it because it was on a tripod. And I had some muskrats out here and I couldn't get the camera turned around in time, but it was another beautiful day in the woods. So having a good time here in Wisconsin. Gonna head back to the camp, catch up with everybody, put a game plan together for tomorrow. Hopefully someone's hauling one in tonight. Stay tuned.